What's up, y'all? Hey, let's dive in. You know, it's about 30 years after Jesus was on this planet and then he ascends to heaven. And 30 years later, the movement of Christianity is expanding and it's growing and it's picking up steam. But there's one particular area that's really scary to follow Jesus, and that area is basically any area that's Roman ruled. And the reason why that area is scary to follow Jesus in is for a lot of reasons. One is because just culturally, it couldn't be any further from the way Rome is being run and the values of Rome. But one of the biggest reasons why Christians had a hard time wanting to publicly follow Jesus in a Roman-ruled area is because of the leader. The leader at this time, his name is Nero, and he took rule when he was 16 years old. He became like the leader of the Roman Empire at 16. I don't know what you feel like as a 16-year-old, if you've reached that age yet. If you feel equipped to do something significant like that. I know 16-year-olds that don't know how to run the dishwasher at home, and you know who you are. That's like all of you. I know 16-year-olds that they don't know how to run the washer and dryer. Mom still does that, and yet this guy is running an entire nation of people all over the world, the Roman Empire. But the problem with this guy who started so young is as he kind of evolved in his leadership, he was a pretty terrible human being. He was an awful human being, and he started to feel some pressure from what was going on around him that he began taking it out on Christians. So if you were a Christian at this time, it was a difficult time, at least to be known as a Christian. And so there was a letter written to a group of Christians in a few different areas as to like what to do and how to live this out. Because what naturally anybody would have done in that place is like one of two things. Either you just kind of go into hiding and you pretend like you're not one of those, or you just blend in and you sort of do what the Romans do, so that you can continue to have business and have friendships and not be exiled and excommunicated and have problems and in some cases persecuted and die. And so you had some options, and the writer of the book that we're talking about, his name is Peter, and he was giving some direction to Christians because the culture did not like Christianity. It's not far from the way that it is right now, not different at all. And he's given some direction on, hey, Christians, if you're a Christian in the house, this is how we live out our faith. And in 1 Peter chapter 2, we're going to study just a couple verses together, starting in verse 11 and 12. And we'll just be there with one another. He begins with this. He says, "Dear friends, I warn you as temporary residents and foreigners." Dear friends doesn't quite do it justice. What that word actually means, dear friends, would be like those that are loved by God. It's a word that says beloved, but we don't use that a lot. It's like those loved by God, that if you're a Christian, man, you are loved by God. And there's a friendship that exists there, but that's a friendship that's primarily because God loves you. And he says, I warn you, but it's not like a warning you should be fearful. It's like, hey, because God loves you, let love be a motivator to live a certain way. He says to live this as a temporary resident and a foreigner. What does he mean by that, to live as a temporary resident, as a foreigner? Well, a couple weeks ago, my family and I went on like this really fun vacation. We went to an area called Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. And we arrive at the airport. We take a bunch of different planes to get there. And our vacation's about to begin. It's the end of the day. And second our plane lands and I get cell service, I get a message from the airline that they lost our bags. So all of our luggage is rerouted somewhere, and there was no way we were going to get it on that day. And nobody could give us any clarity as to when we were going to get it. So it could be the next day or the day after that or whatever. And so we take an Uber to our hotel, and all we have are the clothes that we're wearing. And so I call the airline because, we're at a beach pool vacation, and we want to have fun. And we're not wearing anything that would allow us to do that. And so I called them to see if they could help. Hey, what could we do? Because this is a problem. Like, can you get our bags to us faster? And they're like, listen, your bags are nowhere to be found. Good luck to that. I said, but what we can do is we can give you some money. So my ears perk up. I'm like, okay, what are we talking about? He says, we can give you $150 per person to spend on like whatever you need. I'm like, ooh, okay. $150, there's 4 of us. I'm like, doing the math real fast. Takes me a while. I'm like, carried the one. Bible college, okay, that's $600. Are you saying, sir, that we get $600 to spend on our things? I was like, yeah, like anything I want. It's like anything that kind of relates to travel expenses. $600 on travel expenses? He's like, yeah. It's like, well, sign me up. I now am excited that they lost our bags. So the first chance we get to a store, and the closest store within walking distance is like one of those, the real beach tourist stores. And so we go in, and virtually everything in the entire store, and this is a huge like warehouse size store. Everything in the store says Myrtle Beach on it. I mean, everything is Myrtle Beach, and normally we wouldn't buy anything that says Myrtle Beach on it, but today we're buying everything we can that says Myrtle Beach because we need things. And so it's like we're going crazy in this place. We're going bananas. And even my kids are like, what's going on with Dad? Normally, I don't spend money that freely, but in this time, like, kids, get whatever you want in this beach store. So we're filling up bags, and we've got stuff. Here's my Myrtle Beach shirt right here that I wanted to wear for you. Myrtle Beach gear. I've got everything you think of, bathing suits and shirts and hoodies and hats and things like that. So we are decked out. Well, as we're walking down the street, it just has to, I wish, like, here's a picture of our family. You can't quite make out what everybody looks like, but everybody's wearing Myrtle Beach gear, okay? And we're walking down the street, and we all have just bags filled with stuff. You probably would too, bags filled with Myrtle Beach merch, tons of it. And I suspect that someone was driving down that road, and they saw this family with all kinds of things. And South Carolina, if you've been there before, they got like these really sweet accents, very Southern. Someone was either saying out loud or thinking like, they're not from around here. Like, they saw us walking down the street, and they knew like, they don't live here. Those sweethearts right there, they do not live in South Carolina. They knew that we were, what's the formal word for that? Tourists. They knew that we were tourists and that we weren't like them. There's a sense that when it comes to what we're called to do, if you're a Christian, is to live like a tourist. You're to live in such a way that when people interact with you, when they interface with you, when they spend time with you, when they listen to you, when they're just around you, they're like, not from around here. Something different about them. There's a sense that what is required of us as Christians is that we would stand out in some way, and that's what he's talking about. He's saying you should stand out as a Christian. If you're a Christian, people should notice that you're different. And here's where there's a little bit of confusion, because I think all of us, deep down, we all want to stand out. Like, we all want to be different somehow. We all want people to notice and to recognize and appreciate like who we are. I think everybody wants in some way or another to stand out. But what he's not talking about are the ways that we often try to stand out today. Like, what just feels pretty normal is to stand out when it comes to the way that we dress. Like, stand out with your shoe game, or stand out with your hair game, which I'm jealous that you have a hair game. To stand out with your hat game. stand out with your quad game if you're into that. Like, there's all these ambitions for us to want to stand out. Stand out with the way that we produce on the court, on the field. Like to stand out in the classroom, to stand out online. Like, don't you, like you have something inside of you that says, I want to be noticed. And maybe it's not that you want like a ton of attention, but you just want to be appreciated for like who you are. Well, Peter's describing this. He's saying, hey, if you're a Christian, you're to stand out, but not like that. That's not what he means in terms of standing out. And so what does he mean? What does he mean for the Christian to stand out? Well, he goes on and he says this, dear friends, I warn you as temporary residents and foreigners to keep away from worldly desires that wage war against your very souls. Just real briefly, this is a pretty cool word picture. And he's saying like, hey, if you're a Jesus follower, you're gonna have some ambition to participate in things, and you're gonna have these like desires at times that will compete with your love of God. I have these desires sometimes that compete with my love of God. Sometimes it's a matter of greed. But sometimes money gets in the way of my love for God. Sometimes it's just selfishness and it's what I want. Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes it could be lust. I mean, there's a number of things that can get in the way, and you know what they may be. He's saying, hey, you need to make sure that you keep an eye on this if you're a Christ follower. And the reason why is because if you don't, people are going to get confused. If you follow Jesus, but then you give yourself to everything else that's not godly, people are gonna say like, wait a minute, there's a discrepancy here, there's an issue. And so the word that he uses here is actually to, if you've seen like a basketball team before and there's like a fight that breaks out, sometimes this happens with a guy that doesn't really wanna get in a fight, but he also doesn't want to get punked by someone, so he pulls someone in front of him. He's like, hold me back, bro. You know, that situation? That's the word picture here. It's actually to hold back from worldly desires, to hold back from whatever it is that competes with your love for God. That's what he's saying, is to hold back on that. Why? Because people are going to have a hard time understanding who you are, and you're gonna have a hard time understanding who God is when you fill your life with sin. So he says that, but then he moves on to like get a little bit more specific. What does it mean to stand out? What does it mean to stand out? He says this, in order to do that, be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then, even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior and they will give honor to God when he judges the world. Okay, translation, what is he saying here? The NIV puts it like this, and I really like the translation. It says, live such good lives among the unbelievers that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds. What does it mean to stand out as a Christ follower? It's to live the good life. It's to live the good life. He gives some direction with this. I'll just ask a couple of questions that you can discuss in your groups to kind of get you going as to what does it mean then to stand out and live that good life. I want to give you two areas to just consider. And this is not going to be for everybody because some of you are like, you know what, I think that's a little too much to ask. Like I'm good to follow Jesus, but I'm going to have to compartmentalize like what I give Jesus. I'm not giving him everything. I'm not going to give him all of them. I'm not going to give him my social life. I'm not going to give him my private life. I'm not going to give him like my future. I'll give him heaven and I'll try to be a good person, but I'm not giving him everything. And if that's you, it's going to be really hard to experience Jesus in your life because he kind of does the all or nothing thing. He's like, hey, I want all of your life. I want every part of your life. And it's his ambition throughout your life to get more and more. He says this, I want to stand out. I want you to live that good life. So here's a couple questions just to lead you in the group, letting you think about what does it mean to have that good life. If people were to hear the way that you speak, if people were to listen to the words that you use, would they associate that with the good life? Would your words cause you to stand out? What probably takes place is if like you're online and you're gaming, there's some competitive nature that kicks in. There's some frustration that might happen. It might get a little heated. If people were listening to the way that you speak online as you game, would you stand out? If your words are just rattling off, and if you're going crazy and mean-spirited and rude, you probably blend in. That just blends in because that's what everybody else does. If they were to listen to the way that you joke when you're around your friends, or when you're in the locker room, maybe when you're on the bus or you're just goofing around after school, and they were to listen to the way that you joke, would your words blend in or would they stand out? Blending in would be, we'll just talk about whatever you want. Sexual jokes are fine, belittle someone else. If someone were to watch the way that you carry yourself when you're around other people, and they just see the words that you use, like the volume, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on cuss words, but I do think that the volume of cuss words that are utilized right now, they're so normal. They're so predictable. They're so unoriginal. And by and large, if you want to blend in, just use a lot of cuss words. In your speech, just use a lot of cuss words. But my assumption is that a bunch of you want to be leaders, and you want your speech to reflect your faith, if that's the case. If you want your speech to reflect that you love Jesus and you're following him, this doesn't mean that we're not going to be perfect all the time with this. But just pay attention to what you say. Don't blend in. Stand out. Use words that are kind, and words that are meaningful, and words that are true, words that are loving. So, do you stand out with your words? Will be one big question to ask when you get to groups, and the other one is, do you stand out with your actions? This would be how I'd kind of generalize this one. Something to think about a little bit later is it about you or is it about others? If it's about you, it's likely that you're blending in. Like if every conversation, every topic circles back to you, that you never ask anybody how they're doing, you never ask anybody what's going on in their life, that it's about you, it's likely that you're just kind of blending in. But man, if you want to be about someone else, if you want to be about others, I think you'll start standing out. I think it'll be noticeable to other people. They're different. So those two categories of your words and your actions, do you stand out? Well, my hope will be that you want to. And the reason why we want this, Christians, the reason why we want to stand out is not so that we can stand out. This is the text. It says this. This is the NIV version anyways. It says to live such good lives that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify whom? God. That at the end of the day, we want people to know and understand and get a sense for who God is. And we have a really hard time doing that when we don't reflect him. And if we want to stand out, and if we want the world to know who God is, then when we're in Rome, we stand out. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you for our students. Thank you for your word. And man, thank you for a time that we can live. And even though we're free, there's a lot of struggle when it comes to following you. There's a lot of temptation. There's a lot of challenges. Father, I pray for our students that they would stand out, that they would learn what it means to honor you in all their ways and begin to live the way you call them to. Pray these things in your name. Amen.